Okay, recording in progress. So we are in chapter 4, we agnostics. We're on paragraph 1, page 45. Man, awesome place to start. David, is there anything worth recapping, setting up, or just?
I just think what it is prior to this paragraph, and this is a crescendo of the whole thing, is going to let us know that prior to this, we talked a lot about where self-will has got us. Right in the dumper is where it got us. So it's our marshaled by our human resources. All these things are insufficient. So now we're going to find out what our real problem is here.
And definitely, if you guys can stay on camera, please do. Let's all be able to be eye to eye if you can. If you can, I understand sometimes you got a kid jumping on your back or you're washing your hair or something. So.
Or eating pancakes.
Eating pancakes with with the main man there. All right. 45, first paragraph. Lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live. And it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how were we to find that power? This power, excuse me.
I have two definitions here.
Great.
I have power and then dilemma. So the definition of power from the 1938 Webster Dictionary is defined as the ability to influence the behavior or course of events. And then dilemma, the definition of that is problem or difficulty. So our lack of ability to influence behavior or course of events, that was our problem and difficulty.
Thank you, Sam. So it starts out lack of power, lowercase p, lowercase in the power, not uppercase. We're going to see a lot more of that after page 45. We're going to be talking a lot about power. We're not going to be even talking about alcohol in our bodies anymore after page 45. So lack of power, that was our dilemma. It doesn't say my drinking was my problem. It doesn't say that. It just says lack of power. So let's take a statement. Let's turn it to the question. David, is lack of power your dilemma? Well, then it goes on to the next sentence. It says, we had to, and a had to is a must in the big book. There's so far in Howard and Caffey's study, they've come up with 139 musts or synonyms of must, and had to is one of them. We had to find a power by which we could, and I circled the word live. This is two lives in one. And by the time we get to the 10th step, we're going to know what our will is for anyways, but not to jump too far ahead. This is about living. You know, the alcoholic life was the only one that I knew until I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous. This now we're talking about is we must find a power by which we can live. We had to, which is another must, two musts in the same paragraph to be a. Now we're going to get into a capital letters, which is in an italic writing. And it's going to say we had to find a power greater than ourselves. So it can't be me. I cannot be that power. I cannot out-muscle or out-think it. I'm stealing David's line there. I'm not going to be able to do that. And by the way, that is a acknowledgement to action. I'm going to have some action to get to this power. It's not just going to, not a guy, for me anyways, guy's not a guy in the sky with a big long beard and a cane. He's going to wave a wand and everything's going to be hunky-dory. That's not what's going to happen here. I am responsible for this spiritual awakening. I am responsible for the work. Otherwise, if it was like that, be one page in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It would say, God keeps you sober. Close the book. Have a great life. That's not how this works. This is about a relationship with power and that how I have to find that power. And then it says, obviously, well, prior to this, nothing was obvious to me. I thought I was going to have to figure this out on my own. That is not the case. Then it says, but where and how we're to find this problem. So Bill has unique abilities, like so amazing what he does. He poses the question, then he gives us the answer, and then he solution, and then he gives us the practical program of action throughout the whole book. So I'm excited about this. I read it a million times, but I always get excited about this because this is about having access to power. This is the beginning of me looking at action here, willingness and action. So a lot of musts and have tos.
Yeah, and if we look at again, where are we in the book, and what's the language that Bill's choosing here? So we had really 4 chapters about step 1, and then getting into we agnostics here, a little recap on step 1. In the first little bit on 44 there. So we're doing all this work talking about powerlessness, right? The physical and the mental. And David always recaps, the 10 pages of the doctor's opinion, and the first 23 pages, starting in the normal numbers, is generally about the physical powerlessness, and then page sort of 23 to 43 is generally about the mental powerlessness. So all we've been talking about is powerlessness. So there's another recap here. So it's saying lack of power. Powerlessness means lack of power. I do not have power. So then it goes on to tell us we had to find a power. And again, I love David, great job pointing out the lowercase and the uppercase, because it's a subtle shift if you're not looking for it right here in this little short, powerful paragraph. So lack of lowercase power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power. Still, it's vague, it's non-specific, it's still lowercase, right? A power by which we could live, not a power by which I could stop drinking, but a power by which I could live. And it had to be a capital P power. Note these proper cases, guys. It goes back way earlier in the book. One of my favorite ones, I don't know that it's the first one, David might know, but one of the great ones I love is when Bill's talking about the towers of high finance, and it's capital H, capital F in Bill's story. Like, that was Bill's higher power, and he tells us that, right? That was his be-all and his end-all. It was so important. His whole identity is everything was wrapped up in prestige and presumed power and money, right? So you'll see, as David pointed out, a lot more of these capitalizations. We're going to start proper casing words like power and creative intelligence and spirit of the universe, etc. So it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. And Terry asked the right question in the chat. Is this obvious? Okay, so mechanically, logically, if I'm sitting here taking a newcomer through the work and I'm beating him in the head with the book and he knows everything about what we're reading because I'm making sure that he does, and I'll say, hey, is this obvious to you? And he'll be like, oh, yeah, it's obvious. Okay. It doesn't do any good for someone to answer a question the way that I know I want it answered. As David always says, ask the question, consider it. Right? And I heard another great speaker, I think it was Mark Houston or Joe Hawk, one of those idol guys of mine, who talked about don't answer questions so quickly. Consider them. Because as soon as I answered the question, it's done. And I've taken a position on the question. So if I say, if I'm asked, is this obvious? And I say, yes, it is. Then I'm going to presume on a course where it is obvious to me. What if it's not obvious? What if I just said it because I thought that's what my sponsor wanted me to say? Right? Just like I had to learn to concede to my innermost self, right? And I'm an alcoholic, that I'm an addict. I probably have to learn that this is in fact obvious, because the trajectory of an alcoholic, of an addict, is we begin in delusion, we advance to denial before we graduate to acceptance. So if I'm in delusion or denial still, this probably isn't going to be obvious to me. And then the last little bit here, but where and how were we to find this power? So Bill's going to move on. He said, hey, man, we need this power. It's got to be bigger than ourselves. It should be obvious. We're going to go on to talk about how to find this power. Now, the whole rest of the chapter is really laid out for us to say, or to be willing to admit honestly that it's not obvious, because the entire rest of the chapter is going to make a really compelling case about how we can very easily, with just tiny bits of willingness, start to actually attract and court that power.
Yeah, and even to Dr. Silkworth's letter, which is it's on XXVI. I won't read the whole thing, but in our book, so it talks about really here's a doctor, what he knows about us alcoholics, that we've suffered alcoholic torture and must believe that the body of the alcoholic is quite as normal as his mind. And it did not satisfy us to be told we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life, that we were in full flight from reality, or we were outright, ready for this, Terry? Mental defectives. The doctor's telling us that through his studies that we're full flight from reality, we're maladjusted to light, and we are outright mental defectives. That's and then it's the ideals must be grounded in a power greater than ourselves. And the definition of an ideal is a person or thing regarded as perfect. So I have to have some kind of a power much greater than myself. I can't stop on my own power. I have no power, no choice, no control. Can't stay stopped on my own power. My life is unmanageable. So I must find something to ground that in, and that must be a power greater than myself. And sometimes you hear, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but the fellowship is a power greater than yourself. And it is. But what does it consist of? Human beings. So I cannot, so I got to have a power outside of those human beings we're going to get into next, going to solve all my problems. Not just the drink problem, all my problems.
Sam, did you have something else?
I just looked up the definition of obviously because it's like jumped out at the page to me. And it's defined as easily discovered. Sorry, my cat. It's defined as easily discovered or understood, plain and evident. So I just like that he said, obviously, like the past 45 pages hasn't been talking about the problem. And then if you truly are alcoholic, then it's obvious with reading all these past 45 pages that if you relate to this, then you're alcoholic. You're truly alcoholic. So I just really liked that word and I wanted to enhance it.
Consider, right? Is this evident? Is this plain to you? Right? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. So it's coming from, but where and how are we to find this power? And then the next one's going to begin. Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Where and how to find this power, right? Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. I mean, let's pause right here for a second, okay? Because I'm just thinking, what are we doing here in recovery, right? We're coming in because we can't stop drinking or drugging or engaging in some other sort of addictive, damaging behavior, whatever fellowship we're in. Right? That is what earns us our seat to come into the fellowship and be in the rooms and attend meetings. What makes us eligible for the solution is agreeing that, yes, it is obvious to me that I lack power and I need to find a power greater than myself. That's the whole point of this. And look, I love when Bill is just plain and simple and black and white here. That's exactly what this book's about. To go find some power greater than myself. Its main object. If you were talking to a friend and they didn't understand what we're doing here, what do you do in that AA? What do you do in that CA? What's that book you're always talking about? Like, oh, this book? Yeah, well, it's the book. Its main object is to enable me to find a power greater than myself, which is going to solve my problems. Plain and simple. It's not a novel. It's a textbook intended to be read and studied. It's an instruction manual. Here is the problem. Can't stop drinking and drugging? Yeah. Real problem? Lack of power. What's the solution? Have a spiritual awakening. Have a spiritual experience. Undergo complete psychic change. And just like a mechanic's instruction manual, worn down brake pads, need to put on new brakes. Here's what you're going to do. There's a certain number of steps to get from the problem to the solution. Same thing we have here. Problem, solution, and how to get from one to the other.
Yeah, so, well, that's exactly what this book about. So throughout the book so far, we found out that they're going to give us precise, specific, and clear-cut directions. And now they're going to tell us exactly what this book is about. Is there any room for error here at all for me to think that if there's a different way, guys, we have no monopoly on how to do it. I just ran out of options here. So what it's doing to me is, by saying that, and then it says its main object is enable you find a capital letter P, a power greater than yourself that will solve your problem. Lowercase p on the problem. Because what my problems are today will not necessarily be my problems of tomorrow. If I do this work, they will change. My life will change. It is absolutely impossible not to have a spiritual awakening if you do this honestly and thoroughly. But what this does for me is, as I study the book, and Sam brought up such a great point. We have studied this all the way up to this point, that we found out what David talked about, that once we put alcohol in our body, what happens to us? We break out on this craving. And once we stop, we cannot stay stopped. So I can't manage either one of those two things, and my life is unmanageable. So I have no power, no choice, no control. What I've read up to this point of the book, what I've studied so far, erases the objections that I probably have about alcohol, my alcohol problem. It is a problem. It's not the problem. We're going to start addressing what the real problem is here. It's the second half of the first step, that my life is unmanageable. This is where, on next page, 46, I promise you, it's going to look a lot different. And by the time we get to the sixth and seventh step in the book, on page 76, it's going to be about power flowing in. This book just continues to build and build and build and build. If I study it, it didn't look like that the first few times I read it. I promise you that. This is a lifelong process with wonderful people like you that help me study this book. So I have a better understanding on how to put this in practical action, and it is practical. Absolutely, anyone can do it. So my life can look different, and everybody around me's life can look different too. I can affect other people's life in a different way, and I've had that experience all the time. It just blows me away that I get to be a child of God, an agent of God, and I get to be of maximum service to God and his kids. That's how I get to live my life. So what problems do I have again? Only the ones I create.
All right, continuing the paragraph. So I'm just going to start from the top of it again, because only a couple sentences. Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. That means we have written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. And it means, of course, that we're going to talk about God. Here, difficulty arises with agnostics. Many times we talk to a new man and watch his hope rise as we discuss his alcoholic problems and explain our fellowship. But his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention God. For we have reopened a subject which our man thought he had neatly evaded or entirely ignored.
I have the definition of agnostics, which is defined as a person who does not deny the existence of God, but holds that the existence and the actual origin of the universe are not known and cannot be known. So usually people who think that there might possibly be a God out there, but aren't religious or spiritual at all.
Thanks, Sam.
So, okay, thank you. Yeah, so start from the beginning of that paragraph, and then let me just jump back to that first one, because lack of power again, I just keep thinking about what that really means. So it's like, if I can control the amount that I drink, if I can control that, then that's not lack of power for me. But if I can stay stopped in my own power, then lack of power is not my dilemma there either. And if my life looks manageable, it's not everything showing up on page 52, then lack of power is not my dilemma. So that goes to David's point. I need to consider this. When I drink, can I control the amount I drink? And once I stop, can I stay stopped on my own power? Even given sufficient reason. Is my life unmanageable? And the answer is, for me, yes. Lack of power is my dilemma. So then it tells me what it's going to be about, what I need to do here. I'm going to study this book. I'm going to answer these questions. The main object of the book is find a power greater than myself will solve your problem. That means we're going to write a book which we believe to be spiritual, not religious. This chapter, again, I brought it up every week, and I'll bring it up until we finish the chapter. Bill has scrubbed the book, chapter of agnostics, clean of any religious connotations. He just did a great job of it. I don't know how he did it. I have no idea how he did any of this book, to be honest with you. If someone would put me other than God in this role to write this book, we would all be in deep, deep trouble. I wouldn't know where to start and where to. This is a divinely, inspirationally written. As I study it more and more and more, I'm blown away. That means we read a book we believe is spiritual as well as moral, and means, of course, that we're going to talk about God. So, yeah, we're going to talk about God. And I bring that up because I need to also know with the guy I'm working with, my protege, what he believes too. I need to know that so I know how much I'm going to look at. But, you know, the one thing about this book is if you study it from cover to cover, at least the first 174, including Doctor's opinion, there's a whole chapter called Working with Others. And you don't have to go there. I'm just going to tell you right now that on page 89, the first part of chapter 7, Working with Others, there's a one sentence. I'll just put it out there. You don't have to go there. On page 89, it's in the third paragraph. It says, don't start out as an evangelist or a reformer. So if I read this chapter, it will help me understand how to approach, and we're going to get to that word too here right in 1 second, because Bill uses different definitions or wording for things that mean the same thing. So again, I'm going to talk about God. I don't need to be an evangelist here. I'm just going to talk about how I found a relationship with God. And if you guys want to, go back to page 29, and there's a solution in the second paragraph. And this is another way I can do it. You can do this from the podium. I can do it here with you guys tonight, or I can do this with a new person. Page 29, second paragraph. Each individual in their personal stories describe in his own language and his own power or his own point of view, not my power, of my point of view, the way he established a relationship with God. So I get to explain that to him. Now he can have it, what I have or not. It's up to him to do that. But then it says, if we go back to page 45, in the middle of that paragraph, he says, here difficulties arrive with agnostics. Many times we talk with the new man. That is another way to say we approach them. I don't wait for them to approach me. Dave is really big on this, and I know a lot of guys that he works with is, and so are my proteges. They approach them. We get their phone numbers. They're not calling us. I never called anybody when I first came in. Not going to do that. I would just put my toe in the water, see if I needed to belong here or not. Come to find out, I'm a full-blown alcoholic drug addict. I definitely belong here. But it says many times we would talk to a new man, approach the new man, and watch his hope rise as he discusses his alcohol problem. Why? Because on page 17, they talk about whether we have these common solution or a common problem, which would never help bind us together, but he wants to talk about it because I relate the way he drinks, and he relates the way I drink or can't. And then, but then I give him the solution, but his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention God. For we have reopened a subject which our man thought he had neatly evaded or entirely ignored. What happened there? His mind snapped shut. I cannot run him over with a Mack truck. That's not my job. Not my job. But I'm not going to apologize for having a relationship with power. That's for darn sure. And that's what this whole chapter is capable of doing for me when I work with another person. When I study this with another, I can take an agnostic through this. I can take an atheist through this thing. I can take someone who's a priest or a minister or a rabbi through this thing who has more understanding of this stuff than I do. But this whole point of this chapter for me is letting go of all my old ideas of what I think I know about God, about this book, about my relationships, about all kinds of stuff. I've got to let go of those old ideas so new ones can be replaced.
Hey, Sam, could you look up moral if you have the possibility? Thank you. So again, just going to underscore a couple of things that David said here. So, I love that Bill is just saying it means, of course, that we're going to talk about God. And David does this whenever we go into treatment centers. I think sometimes we go to talk to newcomers, we go to treatment centers, or we're just talking to somebody one-on-one after a meeting, and we're so afraid to use the G word, right? David always says, tonight, we're going to talk about God, right? And we're not beating him over the head with God more than any other concept. It's actually secondary because really we beat him over the head with step one before we even get into God. But there's no sense hiding this, right? Whether I use and I always say I use the word God because it's short, it's one syllable, it's 3 letters, it's easy, right? I don't know if it's the God that I was raised with, being Jewish. I don't know if it's the God of any particular faith. I just know it's bigger than me. It starts with the first thing a buddy asked me when I was first getting sober, when I was trying to use that excuse. Oh, I don't know about God, the higher part, that and the other. He just looked at me, big, tall, 6'6" friend of mine. He looked down at me and he said, "Are you God?" And I said, "No." He said, "Good enough." Right. And that was the start for me. And then as I grew in recovery and I sort of became more and more open-minded, more willing to consider and learn and start to get into a little prayer and meditation, I started to have some sort of concepts of what God is. And today, I don't even know conceptually what my God is. I really don't. I know I'm not God. I know there's something bigger than me that's saved my tail and continues to save my tail when I stay in lockstep with him. And really, that's good enough, because if God is everything or he's nothing, how am I supposed to conceive of what everything is, right? That doesn't even make sense to me, right? So, and on this, difficulty arising with newcomers, and I think it's easier to talk to an agnostic or an atheist about this, because it seems like in my experience, it's easier to present well, you've had these firm beliefs your whole life about, there is no God, or I can't conceive of one. How's that worked out for you? Again, back to the previous paragraph, lack of power. Maybe you should try a little power, right? And maybe it's a little word involved with that power called God. Sometimes some people come in with these religious convictions and they tell, oh man, like I go to church, and I'm just saying this again, it doesn't matter what religion you are, but like a lot of Catholic buddies and stuff, they're like, oh, I love Catholicism, and like I go to mass and all this, and I'm like, how did the way that you were being a presumably good Catholic help you with your drinking or drug problem? It didn't, because you didn't have the right relationship with that Catholic God, right? That goes for all of us. If the way in which we were participating, worshiping in our organized religion, Catholic, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist, whatever it was, if we had been doing it the right way, we probably wouldn't have ended up in 12-step recovery, because we would have had a powerful enough relationship with God where I had turned everything over, and he would have helped me with all my problems. Right? But like most things, I took the cafeteria approach to religion. Right? Just like Bill talks about too. That sounds good, that sounds bad, that sounds like too much effort. Sam, did you find moral?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Please.
Moral is described as concerned with or relating to what is right and wrong in matters of human behavior. So in the
give us this
sentence,
sentence.
Yeah. Where is it? That means we have written a book which we believe to be spiritual, as well as relating to what is right or wrong in matters of human behavior.
So, Bill is telling us now, we're not just taking some sort of ethereal, open-ended approach, right? Yes, we're going to go and find the God of each of our own understanding, and we're going to do this, and we're going to construct a life that's based on the discernment between what is right and wrong. That's why we have steps like 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 and 11 and 12, really. What is my behavior? What has been my behavior? What is my behavior? What will be my behavior? Moral.
Yeah, and to just add on a little bit more, because we've read about this a few times already in the book, and Evie's relationship with God, whether it be a true story or not, let's get facts get in the way of a good story. Go back to page 12 in the second paragraph. In Bill's story, we read this. It's in italic writing. Joe and Charlie are really clear that that's something we really need to pay attention to. And it says, my friend suggested what then seemed like a novel idea. He said, why don't you choose your own conception of God? That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellect mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered for years. I stood in the sunlight at last. So this paragraph here says that possibly his mind shut. He thought he neatly evaded it or entirely ignored it. Bill was an agnostic prior to writing the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. His mind snapped shut until Evie opened it up just this much. And Bill had to consider it, like David has brought up a number of times already. I have to consider other people's ideas possibly. If it worked for you, can it possibly work for me? So this opens my mind up.
We know how he feels. Bottom of 45, guys. We know how he feels. We have shared his honest doubt and prejudice. Some of us have been violently anti-religious. To others, the word God brought up a particular idea of him with which someone had tried to impress them during childhood. Perhaps we rejected this particular conception because it seemed inadequate. With that rejection, we imagined we had abandoned the God idea entirely. We were bothered with the thought that faith and dependence upon a power beyond ourselves was somewhat weak, even cowardly. We looked upon this world of warring individuals, warring theological systems, and inexplicable calamity with deep skepticism. We looked askance at many individuals who claimed to be godly. How could a supreme being have anything to do with it all? And who could comprehend a supreme being anyhow? Yet in other moments, we found ourselves thinking, when enchanted by a starlit night, who then made all this? There was a feeling of awe and wonder, but it was fleeting and soon lost.
I have the definition of prejudice here, which is defined as opinions formed without knowledge or examination to prematurely judge. So in the sentence, we have shared his honest doubt and an opinion formed without knowledge or examination.
You're on mute.
Let's read what's on the page here. First sentence David read. We know how he feels. So Bill knows how he feels because Bill was an agnostic. We have shared his honest doubt and prejudice. Some of us have been violently anti-religious. It doesn't say anti-God. It says anti-religious. There's a difference. To others, the word God brought up a particular idea of him, capital letter H for God, with which someone had tried to impress them during childhood. Religious training. When I was a kid, my parents are Jewish. I was adopted into a Protestant family. Went to church Mondays, Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. I have plenty of religious upbringing in my life, and I was anti-religious, but I was never anti-God. And I did have a lot of religious training, but I didn't shut my mind. I would not call myself an agnostic necessarily coming in. And I didn't reject these things. Last paragraph, last sentence in that paragraph. With that rejection, we imagined we had abandoned the God idea entirely. I don't know that I could have ever done that because I had demonstrations in my life, like my grandparents. So this is for me. I don't know if this is for everybody. My grandparents were very spiritual people. I lived across the street from them. I seen them every day. That woman was a saint, and so was he, my grandparents. I had the best grandparents in the world. Next page, we were bothered with the thought that faith and dependence upon a power beyond ourselves was somewhat weak, even cowardly. That is not my experience, but a definition of creative intelligence. So the definition of creative is a function of the will, a decision to take action, power for my will so I do better. Because I'm my own willpower, I want to do better, but I don't do better. And intelligence is a function of the mind, direction for my mind so I know better. So like if I have a relationship with power, with this creative intelligence, I will know how to do better and I will know how to do better. That's 10-step stuff. That's 11-step stuff. That's what I have to look forward to. I let guys know about that because they obviously coming into Alcoholics Anonymous or Cocaine Anonymous or D or whatever fellowship you're coming into, I'm not having a great relationship with very many people. And I have to let go of all my old ideas on how to have a relationship because I don't know how to do one because my life is unmanageable. And I'm playing God in everybody's life and and I'm writing script for everybody, but I don't hand anyone the script. So I have to let go of my old ideas here. And the last thing I want to say is David's favorite page in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous is on page 27. It talks about old ideas, our emotions, our attitudes, and our ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which once were the guiding force of our lives, We're suddenly cast to one aside. That's what we're talking about here. That is the difference between having a closed mind and an open mind. If I really read page 27 and see what a spiritual awakening looks like, according to what Carl Jung is telling us, those are the things that get cast to one aside and they get replaced with new ones. Not equal to, better than. If I do this work honestly and thoroughly.
Mm-hmm. Never seen anybody not get better ones. They do it all thoroughly and honestly. So you know, it's interesting too. You know, just look at how Bill's writing this, and Bill, with so many brilliant things with how he wrote this book. And Dave was talking about, you know, divinely inspired, which I would agree with. Sometimes he's really hard on us, you know, and really hitting us with a hammer. But in this chapter, at least at this part of it, he's really fishing here. He's kind of reeling us in, and he's using a lot of sort of welcoming and generous language. And so I think there's a lot to be learned from how Bill is talking to us in the book and how we talk to newcomers in the same way. So, you know, we know how he feels, share the doubt and prejudice. This is all about rapport and relating. You know, some of us have been violently interreligious, you know, or the word God brought up these ideas. It goes on, you know, some different, very different scenarios that sort of might have led us to where we are today in our belief or lack of belief. And then he props up on the top of 46 as well, a lot of should be easy to relate to ideas like, hey, look around the world. And this was published in 1939. So he's, you know, writing this a couple of years before. And look what he was writing about then. It's the same stuff as today. Warring individuals, warring theological systems, right? I mean, the news is filled with these things. Inexplicable calamity, the latest tidal wave or monsoon or earthquake. None of this has changed. So we look at the world, he's saying. We went through this and said, oh, there's all this awful stuff. How can there be a God? And I think probably most of us have had those themes in our life, whether short-lived or long. But then he's bringing back around. He's saying, so we understand you might feel this way, but also, haven't you ever, when you happen to have a moment of being in your right mind, been out in the empty cornfield, right, across the street from me and look at all the stars in the skies and be like, man, there's something big here going on, right? Bill's casting a wide net here. He's trying to see what he can do to try to draw us in with just a little tug at a time.
I had the definition of askance,
Oh, great.
which is sideways as to look. So we looked sideways at many individuals who claim to be godly.
Thank you.
And what we're doing here, again, so on page 45, we're not going to talk about alcohol anymore. We're talking about seeking power from now on. In other words, we are in the second step now. We're going to be in the second step from page 45 to 57. So 13 total pages, we're going to be talking about the second step. So we spent a lot of time on the first step up to this point in the book. Now we're going to talk about the second step. And our good friend that we did a big book study with for a long time talked about you can't go into the second step in a good mood. No power, no choice, no control, full of fear, full of resentment, angry. All these things are cropped up. I'm looking them right in the eye. I loathe myself, so I can't go into that. But what is the question here? The question is this: is lack of power my dilemma? Do I need to seek power? If I seek power, this is the treasure map. This is it. All I got to do is this. And I do this every day for the rest of my life. And I never have to live that alcoholic life that I lived before I got here. Is there going to be things that I have to go through? I would go through a lot of them, but I don't go through any of them alone, and I don't go through any of them without power in my life. Access to power all day long. If I stay diligent on this work, all I got to do is stay diligent.
So the last page and a half, Bill, like I said, he's trying to build some rapport, relate, cast a sort of a net, and just sort of draw us in. And now what he's going to do in the next 4 paragraphs, these are my 4 favorite paragraphs on the second step coming here in a row, because he's going to use a bunch of words, but ultimately what Bill is going to say is, look how easy it is to start to believe. That's the theme of the next 4 paragraphs. Look how easy it is. It takes so little. Just give it a shot. The other thing he's going to tell us in these 4 paragraphs is by by buying in to what he's going to tell us and recommend in the next 4 paragraphs, we're going to start to advance. We're going to start to improve. Towards what? Towards the spiritual awakening. If you're under the belief that we work all 12 steps formally one time, and then you have a waterfall moment at the end where you're splashed alive with the spiritual awakening, that is not how this works. What we get is a broadening and a deepening and a widening of the spiritual awakening that starts in the second step. It starts right here. So first full paragraph from 46. Yes, we of agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experiences. Let us make haste to reassure you. We found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results. Even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power, which is God. Go ahead, Sam.
I had a couple definitions
Please.
here. I had haste, which is defined as to act quickly, and then commence is to carry out the first step of action. So let us act quickly to reassure you. We found that as soon as we are able to lay aside our prejudging and even express a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we started to carry out the first step of action to get results, even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power, which is God.
Thank you, Sam. So this is why this is such a great paragraph. This one and the next 3 in a row. So he's transitioning here. Yes, we have agnostic temperament, have had these thoughts and experiences, right? From the last paragraph of questioning God because of all the bad stuff and then having a magical moment, right? But he's saying, let us quickly reassure you. Here's the promise. We found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice, okay, that's not the easy part, right? Laying aside prejudice can take some work, but express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commence to get results. Bill is not saying, okay, so it's become obvious to me that lack of power is my dilemma. He is not now saying you must believe in God if you're going to continue. Alternatively, what he's saying is, if I have just a willingness to believe, if I'm considering the possibility of belief, then I'm going to start to get results. What results is he talking about? He's talking about the result, the spiritual awakening. This is what I said right here early, in the earliest part of the second step, where he's just beginning to talk about willingness and just scratching the surface of belief. He told us we need the power, and he's trying to back it up, and he's trying to reel us in a little, but he's not saying now believe, damn it. He's saying become willing to believe. You know what sounds horrible to me? Running a marathon. Never done it, never going to do it. If somebody made a really compelling argument why it'd be a great idea, and they say, don't sign up for the marathon today, you willing? Consider running it? I say, yes, I'm willing. I may never do it, but who knows? Maybe then I'm like, all right, well, I'll get on the treadmill for 10 minutes today. Right? And I'm not going to do this because my knees are beat to crap. Probably a bad analogy. But maybe 10 minutes on the treadmill becomes a mile around my subdivision, and maybe a mile becomes a 5K and a 10K and a half, and then a full thing. But it's all got to start with my willingness, because if I block it off, if I just say no, then it's not obvious to me that lack of power is my dilemma. And if it's not obvious to me, if I can't come to the point that it is obvious, then I can't move on into, I got to go back to 1. Because I still don't believe I'm powerless and my life is unmanageable. But if I'm just willing to believe, then what happens is I start to get some results. I start to move down that broad highway, right? And I'm going to be able to start laying aside some of those prejudices. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, so first paragraph, or beginning of that paragraph says, yes, we have agnostic temper and had these thoughts and experiences. Again, he's hoping that we relay here. Let us make haste to reassure you, and here's the promise with two conditions. We found that as soon, and there's a timeline too, by the way, we found that as soon as you're able to lay aside prejudice, my preconceived thoughts or my opinions, and express even a willingness, the door of willingness will crack open. I have found the door of willingness. It's right here. Says willingness right on it. To believe in, which means to take action, and the power greater than ourselves, we commence to get results. That's a promise with two conditions, willingness and belief. And I'm going to have to continue to seek this power. And I've done this with a couple of my guys in the past. I've asked them to write down the qualities they need their God to be. Even though it's inadequate, just write it down. It doesn't matter. Make a beginning. And then what I found out is they are inadequate because the way I define God is he's infinite. I cannot explain him. He's all power. I'm finite. But it says, in that paragraph, it says, even though it was impossible for us to fully define or comprehend God, which is God, this is the relationship I'm going to have with some kind of power. Why? I'm letting go of willingness. I'm letting go of my old ideas, my prejudice, my preconceived thoughts, and my opinions. And I am making a decision soon, in 3, to let go of, 2, I'm letting go of my old ideas, have a belief that there might be a power greater than myself, and 3, I'm going to make a decision. And that decision in 3 is going to, I'm just giving you a spoiler alert. If you haven't done this work yet, it's going to change your life forever once you make that decision.
And then I'm going to redefine the word prejudice, which is opinions formed without due knowledge or examination. So we found that as soon as we were able to lay aside our opinions formed without knowledge or examination, and even express a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we have commenced to get results.
In some of these words too, when you break them down into their original pieces, prejudice, prejudge. Right? I am forming an opinion. I'm forming a position. I'm discerning before I have any experience or evidence. So, and I said it's tough to lay aside the prejudice. David took us back to page 27, right? And so the ideas, right? Stuff in our heads, emotions, stuff in our hearts, and then attitudes, I would say, is the stuff in our guts. That's where the prejudices live, in our bellies, right? That's the attitudes. That's the yucky stuff. So I can't just cast that aside, right? Dr. Jung makes a point of saying he's this brilliant psychiatrist. He couldn't cast those things aside for Roland. The vital spiritual experience, the spiritual awakening is what cast it aside. So that's what I'm saying. It's a tall order to completely lay aside prejudice. But what Bill is saying here is give it some effort. Just do your best. You don't have to be all in. You don't have to believe. I should be speaking in the first person singular. I don't have to believe. I just have to be willing to believe. I can hold on to my prejudices, most of them. Just chip away a little bit, just enough to crack the door. Because if I'm in the dark, I can't see a thing. Like crack the door to the outside, I get a little bit of light. Right? Eventually, I'm going to get the result I'll be able to see.
Yeah, and again, we'll go back to David's page again. Old ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which was for the guiding force of my life. And David brought it up. No human power can produce that. See, I thought sometime if I just got the right girl or the right job or the right amount of money or the car or whatever those things are, that was going to change things, but it did not. I was still irritable, restless, and discontent until I could experience the ease and comfort that comes at once and having a few drinks. Because I always went back to what my solution was. There was something happened to me in this drinking career that I have that no longer did I like myself anymore, that I had no power, no choice to control, and I understood that for the first time ever, and I wanted a different way to live. So if I believe that there's a power greater than myself that worked for David, that worked for Rob and Sam, could that power work for me too? And the next paragraph is going to talk about that. We can, again, it's going to talk about, I don't have to have your conception of God. And AA doesn't have a God. We have a power that's greater than ourselves, and you get to call it whatever you want to call it. And Bill's going to give us a bunch of euphemisms for what that looks like in the next paragraph. So it's a phenomenal. This chapter is phenomenal.
And make no mistake here too. Ultimately, we have to get to belief. There's an order of operations here. We have the second step. Came to believe means I am believing, if I'm going to come to believe, that a power greater than myself can restore me to sanity. So I have to get the belief. Why? Because the belief is then going to beget the faith. I can't jump right to faith. And again, I bring it up frequently. Go listen to Joe and Charlie. Big Book comes alive. Charlie opines. I shouldn't say it's the wrong word. Charlie beautifully discusses moving from belief to faith better than I could ever do. But before we're into belief, we're just in the willingness to believe. Just give myself a chance. Don't slam the door one more time. Slamming the door has left me in the dark where I had been for all these years. Crack it. Just become willing. Overcome a little fear. Lay aside just a nugget of the prejudice. Right? Keep it swallowed down in your gut. All right. I don't think we should read another paragraph. I know we were a couple minutes before the hour, but yeah. Don't keep everybody here all night. All right. Let me kill the recording.